This is all about witchcraft witchcraft is for the forgotten, the wounded and warriors. Okay, so literally witchcraft. How do you stumble on witchcraft? Well, I believe in the witch's wound. Okay, hi Mr. White Walk, it's lovely to see you today. Nah. Okay, so the witch's wound. Has anyone heard of the witch's wound? There's a really good book out actually called The Witch's Wound, which explains it massively. Has anybody read it? Does anybody know what I'm on about? So the witchcraft wound goes back. It doesn't just go back to the Barren times. A lot of people will say, oh, the Barren times. I know that was like one heck of a massive, horrendous witch's wound. Okay, but it doesn't. It's because the media goes on about that a lot. We think it is. It actually goes back before religion. It goes back before Christianity and all that. Okay. Basically, there's always been stigma on witchcraft, which is very, very sad. It's often because people are misled by society, misled by media, Hollywood, and often arrogancy and not being educated, and a reason to bully, I guess. And basically right back before religion, going right back before 250 BC, when all of us were pagans. And what happened was one day, I think it was in the Roman times. I'm not a history buff. Yeah, that's right, Mr. White. Like, well, it went down as evil. It's not evil. It's actually beautiful. It can be evil. There's light and dark in everything, don't you think? Okay, but not intentionally. Not where I come from, anyway. And we're going right back to sort of Roman times. They were a bit, they were bullies, weren't they, the Romans? You must admit, they were bullies, yeah? And they kind of, everybody was pagan before, and they didn't like that. When the Romans come in, they wanted to take the pagans over, so they started calling them heathens. So witches were pagans, that we were all witches, we were all pagan. And they started to bully them and all that lot, calling them heathens, because they were nature lovers. They worked with nature, they worked with the old gods. And, there was Romans and the Greeks and that, they wanted to take it over. They wanted their power. So they bullied them, basically. So that's where it really started. And then Christianity came in much later, and then basically it started with a pope, actually. Okay, it actually started with a pope. He decided one day he had PMT, he had one on, he's been a bit grumpy. And he thought, who could he bully that day? So he turned around and he said, was that, oh wow, CJ, keep that thought. That's amazing. That's gross as well. I'm going to pin that. Thank you, CJ. He decided he had, a bit of a mood on. He was arrogant. He wasn't very nice. So he decided he wanted to bully somebody. So he said to whoever works for him, because he's high mighty, pompous, go and tell all the pagans, if they do not convert to, I think it was Catholic or something like that, they have to leave the town. Okay, that's how it started. That was before the Barren times, way before. Okay, and I don't know, CJ, would you know the date? I could ask Sherlock. Somebody else might know. I'm rubbish at dates. Anyway, it's way before Barren times, way before. Okay, and so they went out. They did as they told because they had to. They were scared. And they told all the pagans, get out or convert. I think it was Catholic or something like that. So a lot of them did, okay, because they were frightened. A lot of them left if they had the money. Remember, a lot of them were poor. So it's all about control and power and fear. And some of them were pretty brave. They didn't. They pretended they were Catholic and they'd do this and that. But behind the closed door, they'd go into the woodland. They would stay in home and they'd worship the old gods and the goddess and do their witchcraft. And they were doing their healing, doing their blessing, their divination, coming together in their circle of support. Well, anyway, time went on and he thought, oh, everything's going really well. Okay? And then, what happened then is he found out that some of the pagans were still around, they had not converted to whatever religion, Catholic or something like that. So he thought, he got out the wrong side of the bed again. And he thought, no, I'm not having this. I'm going to bully him again. So you need to, he decided to rev it up like narcissistic bullies do, like to have a bit of power. So he decided that, tell them if they don't convert, take them by the sword. Now that really frightened people. So, you see a lot of them, they were fleeing. They definitely gave up their witchcraft. It wasn't worth the risk. They were going to be, hurt, their family. You can imagine that fear. They didn't want to give it up. So they did that. So, they were frightened. They were controlled. It was mass power. You know the type. And that's where the witch wounds started, really. It wasn't much later, the burning, of the witches. That was much later. It was it Matthew Hopkins? And that, I've got my own thoughts on that. But he wasn't a very nice man. He was a bully too. Another narcissist who got in power, and unfortunately, and decided to destroy anybody he didn't like. So he decided to pick on witches. I'm sure he had a thing about women as well, but there was men as well. But, if you could look at the DNA and the trauma, which we call the witch wound, the trauma right back to pagan early times, or the ancient times, right back to now, the witches have always been bullied. We've been told we're evil. We've been told that we work with the devil. We don't even believe in the devil. That's a Christian thing that was made up against witches. They've been made to always be pushed out because they're different. And why is that? There's a saying that goes around that says, I can't remember it properly, but it says, why fear the witch? Shouldn't you fear the one who's doing the burning? Do you know what I mean? Why fear the witch? Shouldn't you fear the one who's actually burning them? And it comes down to fear and control and power, and sheep, being a sheep, and being scared and being converted because they're frightened. If they spoke against or stuck up for the witch, they'd get horrific things done to them too. So it's all about the power and the mass control of many. And unfortunately, that is sunk down our DNA. Could you imagine, as a witch, having that in your DNA and being passed down and down through the ages, through the generations to now? And also, the society's got this horrible way of clinging on to crap, and it never seems to learn. And another thing with society, it always likes to hold on to the bad history. Have you noticed history? You hear about the bad history, the bad things, but you never hear about the good things. Or if you do, it's a little bit. Because I don't like people, because humans can be quite sadistic. So, in times have changed, yes. Like CJ said. CJ, can you put up that thingy, bit of what you said earlier? It was really interesting. And this DNA been going down and down and down. And we hold that in ourselves. Trauma like that cannot just be dispersed by a therapy session, okay? That's not going to work. It's not going to be dispersed by a load of crystals. It's not going to be able to be saged away, okay? Trauma like that will literally go down in the DNA in each cell. And, this is why witches today, we talk about opening the throat chakra, about speaking the truth, about being out there, by standing up. So witchcraft is for the forgotten, the wounded, the warriors, because if you're a witch, you've always been a witch. And in that DNA, in that blueprint coming forward, often you'll find witches, the forgotten, the wounded, the warriors. There is a lot of stigma. There is a lot of false media. And I feel, it's not an easy route to take, is it? It's not an easy route to take. So I always say witches were never born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They're never rich. They were never in castles. The ones in castles were often the ones burning the witch.